have a meeting and people do get CPE. I've got some background noise. Is that me or others? Okay, I'm gonna keep continuing. Someone interrupts me if there's a problem. This will be recorded. I do want to thank the steering committees before we get started here. So steering committee is made up of CFOs and sponsors. The CFOs are Cindy Cooper with Lincoln Harris, Jim Farrell with GHIG Services, Bill McMahon with Crow Holdings, and Shirley Ogden with Lee Financial. I appreciate their help. The sponsors, Wade Hughes, and actually, we should have a different name there for Wade's for 5Q. Let's update that for next time because Wade's not as directly involved anymore. Jason Myers and John Wilding with Barnes and Thorngood, and David Ramsey and Heidi Henderson with Engineer Tax Services. So between those, also, wow, we got a bunch of, this is a big one. We got Tom Rogers, who's also going to help moderate today with McGriff, Greg Blankenship with Truist, and Paul Gralick and Chris Johnson with Baker Tilly. And Chris Johnson will be also moderating today, so we appreciate those guys. So that team together makes all of this happen. They pick the topics, they find the speakers, and hopefully soon, these sponsors also help find the venue when we meet together in a space, hopefully with low CO2 levels. And where we have low CO2 and high alcohol content, along with some food, hopefully. So hopefully we'll get back to that in the next 3 or 4 months. And when we get back to that, the sponsors are the ones that pay for that. We do ask that as you have needs out in your companies, please invite our sponsors to have a seat at the table when you're looking for accounting firms or insurance or IT help, any of the above. Please reach out to our sponsors and include them in your search for help. So super quickly today, we will have 4 polling questions. If you're looking for CPE, you have to be here at the start of the presentation. The presentation starts when Chris Johnson starts speaking, so I'll try to get done speaking real quick. It ends at the end of all of the questions. You have to be here at the start and through at least 15 minutes. You have to answer at least 3 of the 4 polling questions. If you skip the polling questions, you will not receive CPE. But you don't have to get them right, you just have to answer them. The only other thing I have to say is that if we are unable to complete the full 50 minutes because of any technology issues, we will not be issuing CPE. So we can't make that work. It hasn't happened before, it probably won't happen today, but we should be good. So with that, I'd like to introduce first Chris Johnson, who will be doing the main moderation, and then Tom Rogers throughout the presentation. I like the way we stretched them there. It's kind of a neat look for them. Really long, skinny heads there. And Tom Rogers, Chris Johnson will be doing the moderation, and Tom Rogers will be handling the questions at the end. So with that, Chris, you're up. Thank you for all of your help.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for your time today, and thanks for attending. And I appreciate the long, skinny head picture because I don't have that anymore. So thanks for the CGI on that. Welcome to this afternoon session. I'm going to introduce first Tom Tipton with Suntex Marinas. I've known Tom for about 22 years now. He and I were both seniors at Arthur Andersen back in for me, the very, very, very late 90s. I think Tom was a little bit ahead of that. Obviously, Tom was very aware that Andersen was doomed and got out of there in 2000 and went to work for Interphase, a technology company in Plano. And actually, he and I continued our relationship where I helped him on the tax side for many years at Interphase, and he continued to escalate up into the CFO position there. In 2015, Tom decided to do something radically different where he joined Suntex Marina. So he went from a tech company to a REIT, a real estate REIT, and has been the CFO there for the last 6 years. So what really kind of sparked this, and you'll hopefully hear a tie-in with Jim Hinckley as well, is right before year end, I had lunch with Tom, and we were just meeting with a couple of bankers, And so you asked the casual question, so how's business going with all of this stuff? And he had an interesting answer, a really interesting story about what the impact of COVID has done to the marina business. At about the same time, we were working with Jim at Century and Jack Marquardt, and they had kind of a similar story. So they were opportunistically seeing some trends within the golf arena. So when we sat down and tried to think of some speakers, rather than look at all the negative things that have transpired out of COVID, what we tried to say is, where have there been some success stories, and are there tie-ins between those two? So the moderation will be light today. Tom will pick it up probably when Jim gets on and introduce Jack Marquardt, who will give us the lead in with Jim. But with that, I figured maybe Tom, if you can give a little bit of background on Suntex, what it is for those who don't know, its past, what it's currently doing, and maybe what the strategy looks like, and almost repeat that story we had at lunch as to what have you seen in the marketplace, but maybe give a little bit of history on yourself, the entity, and what you've seen in this environment.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Chris. One of the first things I'd have to point out is, we talk pictures, and I look at that picture of me on the deal, I must have been 12 years old for that LinkedIn picture, because I've changed quite considerably. But yes, so Suntex, a very interesting story. One of the things that I had to think through before I left technology and came into marinas was, the first thought of jumping into a company that is related to marinas, I thought, man, I'm going out of the frying pan into the fire. This was, a high net worth kind of a deal. Customers, how would they handle recessions, all of those issues. I thought there would be some real challenges to this particular industry. But as I researched it and as I learned more about it, there's a lot of strength in our industry and in the boating industry, not necessarily the boating industry, but in the marina industry, throughout some downturns. And so we saw a lot of that occur with this at this time with the COVID pandemic. But going back to the early 2000s, when a couple of guys that were friends and invested in general real estate, really commercial real estate for office buildings, Johnny Powers and Ron Rhodes, they kind of happened into an opportunity to buy a marina in the Austin area. And they did that. In fact, Johnny, our CEO, would tell you he maxed out like 6 credit cards in order to come up with the equity to finish the deal, which, had I known him at the time, I wouldn't have recommended, but he did that. And they bought their first marina. And what they found was, compared to office complexes, owning a marina where you buy at a 8, 9, 10 cap, and it flows cash pretty nicely. It did very, very well. They bought a few more, and then really decided to get out of doing the normal commercial buildings, and then went into the marina industry. And that's really where they focused for the next 4 or 5 years, got a nice portfolio together. And the small little company in the middle of Dallas was starting to win bid proposals and buy up assets in the Caribbean and everywhere else that some of the other players in the marine industry were starting to take notice. And those two guys, those two founders, actually sold their platform in 2007. You talk about perfect timing. They left the business in 2007, selling to another marina company. And that was good, because during that time, they got to see how the marina industry worked within a recession, and it stayed pretty strong. But this particular company that bought them was heavily invested in the Mideast and in the Mediterranean, which didn't do as well. So long story short, they were able to get their platform back in about 2010, and then created the business plan that's now Suntex Marinas today. Between 2010 and 2015, they cobbled together through different funds ownership in about 21 marinas. And the challenge for them there was they couldn't continue to grow because every time they had a marina acquisition, they had to go raise capital. And that was becoming more and more problematic. And they had 21 marinas with 21 different capital stacks, and it was difficult to create the synergies. So in 2015, they decided to work with Deutsche Bank to raise some capital. That's when my opportunity came to come into Suntex and help complete that process and begin to develop a marina platform where they both owned the real estate and operated the marinas, all under an existing capital stack. And so that we raised $200 million in that first year, really deployed all of that capital in buying marinas over the next year and a half, did a second raise, an additional $100 million. And then at the same time, we worked on getting this asset class into a REIT structure, which was critical to really put the business in a potential to put it into the public market. And that's a whole nother interesting sidebar, but the process of going through a private letter ruling with the IRS in order to convince them that floating docks were real estate was a very interesting activity that took about 2.5 years and was quite educational to go through. But we ultimately did get that private letter ruling and have been operating as a REIT ever since. And to really get down and make a long story short, at one point we owned up to 41 marinas during this time. Today we've traded out some of the smaller marinas and have focused more on the trophy marinas. We're at about 31 marinas today, and we've grown our NOI pretty nicely during that time. Fast forwarding to COVID and this year, one of the things that we saw, because originally when just like everybody, and when we were faced with all of a sudden we had to come home, stop doing some business in March, about this time last year, we went to work on analyzing all the bad things that could go on. But the bright spot we found was in the social distancing world. What better way to social distance than being on your own boat with the people you choose to be around? And I heard the earlier conversations about CO2 levels and being outside. Being able to be outside with your family who you're already living with or close friends, and being on a boat turned out to be a desirous thing for a lot of folks to do. I can't tell you the number of people I've talked to within the banking community or the finance community as we've been raising money who are first-time boat owners in 2020. The boating industry has increased almost 30% in boat sales, and then that really translates nicely into our business. And then additionally, we have as part of our business, we have boat rental programs and boat club programs, and we can't own enough boats to keep to keep the customers happy. So it's been quite an interesting turn of events over the last 12 months as folks have flocked to boating. And a couple of, one of the things that that we do a little differently in our industry in Suntex versus the way that some folks have looked at the marina industry is we've had a very hospitality oriented view of the way that we want to run our business. So said another way, the way that the industry had really largely been dealt with in the past was more like self-storage. You provide a boat owner an opportunity to to dock their boat with you. They come in and out, they deal with their boat. All you really do is provide the real estate for them to have a place to store it. We really tried to change that and create a more holistic approach for the boater, where we offer service centers and we help them, identify folks to help fix the boats, or we have fuel, we have restaurants. We try our best to create more of a hospitality environment for them. And what we found in these COVID days is that, that emphasis has really helped with when new boaters come to the industry for first time. We've had the team on the ground and folks who may test the waters in a boat rental or a boat club program, and then ultimately buy a boat. That experience that we're trying to sell on the water, we hope and we think our strategy is that will result in not just a blip of people in the boating industry, but people who really keep doing this long term, even after more opportunities come in later on for other avenues for people to enjoy recreation again in the future. We still hope that they come back to boating, because we've created this this customer oriented approach there. And it's a little bit like the golf community. In fact, we hired a COO from the golf industry to help create that more club-like environment at our properties. So Chris, I don't know if that helps answer what you guys were looking for, but
no, that's a good tee up, Tom. I guess, from your perspective, where do you go next? Assume that COVID settles down, whatever that means. You're trying to create the stickiness, the country club environment within the marina. And by the way, I can appreciate that, because, as a boat owner, we always say, whenever you're trying to get your boat serviced or fixed, you're like, okay, well, it's on lake time. You never know when you're going to get it back.
mm-hmm.
It's not right. You had to take it off the water from someplace. So, and maybe, if you can answer the question, where do you see kind of next trends of that as you fulfill, making a more country club atmosphere? And I was pretty interested, at lunch when you said we couldn't buy enough boats. So is there some
Mm-hmm.
sort of future that says we're going to take on used boats? We want to, if somebody does want to get out of the boating industry and we're trying to fulfill that, that's another way for us to make revenue and keep, rotating in the next generation of boat owners.
Yeah, no, yeah. So great point. I would say, to answer the second part of that question first is, we actually call our boat rental and boat club program the circle of boating. We call that internally that, where basically what you have is the average boat owner who actually owns a boat is about 55 years old. And what we're trying to do is get the younger generation interested in boating early. And boating can be a challenge, because it's not quite as easy as driving a car. It can be, if you own a boat, like you mentioned, getting it serviced is a large part of the challenge, a large part of the problem. But people love the water, and if you can get them hooked on it early, we found that the best way to do that is through the boat rental program. So they get the idea, let's go to the marina, let's rent a boat, no long-term commitment, just take it out for 4 or 5 hours, have a great time, and then you want to do that again and again and again. And then once you get them interested there, we have boat clubs, where it's like a country club environment, where you're going to have a little bit nicer boat. It won't have the Suntex logo on it. It'll look more like your boat. So when you're bringing people to the lake, it's really no different than you owning a boat, but it's always a top of the line boat. And they'll join the club and be in the club, pay their dues, have access to the boats. And that's a little bit closer to ownership. And then from there, like you mentioned, what we're doing is we're finding that there's a certain number of hours of use of our boat before we need to turn that boat. It's a little bit like the rental car industry. Once you get so many miles, so many hours, it's better to turn the boat, get some value for it, and then replace that boat. And so what happens is, and this is happening maybe on 10% of the boats that we're pulling out of the fleet, we're able to sell those boats to many times former boat club customers who buy that boat because they love that boat. They get it at a discount from us, and then they rent a slip in our marina. So now you've got your real estate customer. So that's kind of the circle of boating. And then at the end, when boaters are getting older and don't really want to deal with the boating ownership again, they go back to clubs and rental. So that's how we've tried to deal with the boating lifestyle, to bring more people into the fold. And that has been unbelievably successful in 2020. In fact, we had in that segment of our business, we had 3 years worth of growth. What we expected the growth rate to be in the next 3 years looking forward, we achieved in 2020. Now, we don't think that that's going to continue to increase at that level, but we do think we can maintain that level as long as we offer good customer experience to these folks. Because your first experience on the water is gonna make a big difference there. And then I think the other aspect of what you asked in terms of what's next for Suntex, I don't think we're just going to continue to grow at 40% a year in the circle of boating area. But what we are trying to do is we're trying to create continue to create a better experience for the customer. So the marina industry is not well versed in technology. So it's very antiquated, it's very fragmented, it's really hard on the customers. So our view is we're trying to put together with technology a digital boater app to make it easier on the customer, create relationships with service providers where if we don't have to provide the full service offering, because it's really hard to make money that way, but we can know the right service centers and offer a concierge service to help connect the service providers with the boater and help bring that to the boater so that they don't have to take their boat out of their slip or take their boat, take it out of the water down the road to get it serviced. We can bring service providers here. So anything that so again, I think what we're going to find is in order to keep people engaged in the boating industry, we need to continue to make it easy for them to enjoy it. More time on the water, less time working on your boat.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, we do have our boat at a slip, and to your point, I want to be on the water as quickly as possible. I want minimal hassle. I don't want my stuff stolen. I don't want, things broken, et cetera, et cetera. And you obviously want to maintain a certain level of clientele that surrounds you on the slip. And just to be blunt, I don't think our marinas run nearly as nicely as the ones that you're running. So, I'll try to make an intro, see if you can just buy it real quick and fix it. But I think that's well said. I mean, who would be, who's your competition? I don't mean direct competition for marinas, but if you're saying we want to increase the experiences, does Bass Pro Shops become competition for ancillary things like life jackets and all the stuff that's kind of a necessary addition to a boat?
Yeah. I would say we don't look at those guys as competition. In fact, we look at anything that is creating the boating environment to be easier and more accessible to the general population to be a partner for us. Because for us, where our bread is really buttered on the real estate side of our business, it is being able to rent slips at always increasing rates per linear foot and being able to retain that occupancy over a long period of time. And the way to do that is to have more people interested in boating. And if we believe that we offer a superior experience, and by the way, I should I should preface this, it is harder to offer those kind of experiences to the smaller marinas on lakes. That's one reason why our business model works a little bit better for the larger marinas on lakes and the larger coastal marinas that makes up the bulk of our portfolio. It's easier when you have a bigger footprint to be able to offer that type of experience. But again, that's what creates the stickiness in our marinas. One of the things we try to focus on is buying marinas and becoming marinas that are first to fill and last to leave. You hear that a lot in the real estate industry, especially in hospitality. We want to be the first ones to fill and the last ones to leave. And if we do that, we can create that stickiness that can continue to ride the recessions.
No, that's great. I think we're saving any kind of Q&A towards the end, and we're kind of close, Eric, unless I'm wrong on this on transition from a time point of view. So I don't know if anybody has some quick questions for Tom that we want to answer now versus later, or do we want to introduce Jack and Jim?
Hey, Chris, this is Tom. I think we'd like to give Jim some time and save all our questions for the end, if that works.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I don't want to cut.
I agree. I stepped into the kitchen for a second. Go ahead.
Sorry. So all good. So I don't want to cut into Jim's time. I just want to say I'm on to work with Jim and his management team for going on 9 years now. And I'd like to just turn it over to Jack Marquardt, who's going to introduce Jim, and Jim's going to tell his story. And I promise you 20 minutes isn't going to do it justice. So Jack, if you don't mind. Can we unmute Jack Marquardt?
Yep, working on it right now.
Thanks, Ashley.
Mhm.
How's that? Can y'all hear me?
Yeah,
There we go.
we're good, Joe.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, I'll say this. There are few people, I think, that get to live their dream, but I happen to believe that Jim is one of those individuals. Jim has a passion for golf. He started off as a bag boy at a private club, worked his way up the corporate ladder to become president of Club Corp, and today is the CEO and owner of his own company, Century Golf Partners Management. Throughout the years, Jim has had the opportunity to rub elbows with and develop relationships with the upper echelon of the golf industry, but none greater than his relationship with the late great legend Arnold Palmer. And it's because of that relationship that we have the exclusive rights to use Arnold Palmer Golf Management throughout the globe. But I would like to share a favorite story that Jim told me one time about talking with Mr. Palmer. And it's when he called him up to wish him happy birthday. And he said, "Arnold, you're my second favorite 84-year-old. And Arnold was like, what do you mean? He said, Jim said, well, my mother's 84. So wasn't much that Arnold could say, kind of gave him a chuckle. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
All right, Jack, thanks. And thanks for the introduction. As Jack mentioned, I've been in the golf business all my life. And I really had two careers. The first career was with Club Corp, again, where I started as a teenager, working in a bag room, became a golf professional, and eventually over time became president of the company. And Club Corp is Dallas based here. I spent 32 years there. I got a great education experience, had many, many unique projects. I assume a lot of you on the call here are golfers, but we had some iconic properties that I was directly involved with. We acquired Pinehurst, and I was the first person, from Club Corp on the ground and shepherded that deal for some 18 years. We acquired Barton Creek, a great resort and golf country club down in Austin, and then, Firestone up in Akron, Ohio, and all those are tour sites. We've now hosted, 3 US Opens at Pinehurst. As Jack mentioned, I really got to know a lot of people in the industry and developed great relationships with icons, players, architects, and industry officials. I left Club Corp when Robert Dedman, the founder, passed away and started Century. And I really wanted to establish Century and position it with a very unique differentiation from the competitors out there. And I think that's an important issue for any company is how do you differentiate yourself? There were several competitors in place, obviously my old company, many that had unique positioning, but most of them were hospitality oriented. And I wanted to position Century as really the best business team in the industry. So we're more like a business solutions partner as opposed to just a good golf management company. And so we became, the business partner versus the hospitality vendor. We also wanted to focus our new business efforts on financial firms that were invested in the golf course landscape and sector. Private equity firms, lenders, investment bankers, public companies. We really became their operating partner. I got the business started by raising capital with Lehman Brothers. We used to brag that Lehman was a partner. GE Capital, Walton Street, a private equity firm out of Chicago. We raised $175 million in debt and equity, and we acquired 2 regional golf portfolios in 2005. We've since round tripped those and sold the portfolios and earned a great return for our partners. Then during the recession, we did most of the golf and the golf real estate loan workouts for Wells Fargo, Wachovia, GE Capital, Lehman. There's a lot of business for us to do. Then over the last few years, we've continued to take on different assignments for many large financial firms such as Blackstone, Paulson, and Fortress. So today we've got a portfolio of 50 golf courses scattered around the country. Half of them we have an ownership interest or a long-term lease, and the other half we manage for other third-party owners. And they're a mix of public golf courses, country clubs, and golf resorts. And I think, one of the distinguishing factor about our company is our unique relationships, and courses, and partnerships. Jack mentioned, Arnold Palmer. I'd gotten to meet Arnold, over the years at many of the PGA professional tournaments that we hosted some of our courses. And when I was starting Century, he had his company, Arnold Palmer Golf Management, tied up with a private equity firm, and it was not going well. And so he asked me to help get his brand back, which I did. And then as soon as he got his brand back, about 2 seconds later, he said, I want you to take it going forward. And so Arnold was a great friend, and a great partner, for many, many years. We continue to work with his family, that continue to own and grow his company. And one of my partners, Doug Howe, spends a lot of time working with the family on their strategy. Peter Ubroff is also one of our partners. For a lot of the folks, my age, you'll remember that, Peter was the first person. He developed the 1984 Los Angeles Olympic Games. That was the first ever profitable Olympic Games. After that, he was commissioner of Major League Baseball, Time Man of the Year. He got into the hotel business and he rolled up DoubleTree hotels, sold it to Hilton, went on the Hilton board, was on the board of Coca-Cola, Bank of America. And then, we got together again when Pebble Beach came on the market. We were the bidding for Pebble Beach. Peter ended up winning it. And so today he's the co-chairman and leads the group that owns Pebble Beach. We also have a long-term relationship with the Walt Disney Company. We have a long-term lease, 20-year lease on all of their golf courses down in Orlando. And for us, that's just been a great partnership to be able to learn the Disney culture and take it into our company. And then just recently, we acquired PGA West, which is a 9 golf course complex in Palm Springs. If any of you watch, golf on TV recently, 4 weeks ago, we hosted the Amex event, PGA Tour event there. So that's a fun property for us. But, real estate investors understand our business because we live by real estate metrics. Again, it's occupancy, it's rate, it's margin flow through. And, our business trades at cap rates and the 8 to 10 cap rates. Tom had talked about, the country club side of it and how he makes his marinas try and feel more like country clubs. And we think we've got a unique approach to the way we do that makes it successful. One is culture. One of the things we learned from our partnership with Disney is how they embed a purpose into their culture with their cast members about how they act and feel about their job. And they've taught us that. And we've been able to use that, across the board, one, because our mission statement is to be a good partner, but more important, our purpose statement is to improve the lives of the people we serve. It's incredibly powerful for our team to understand that, you're not just standing behind the counter and someone's walking to play a round of golf. It's how do we create something special and something unique for them? We focus a lot on experiences, especially during COVID. one of the things we do in our country clubs is we try and create a lot of events and activities and for members and their guests to give them a reason to continue to come to the club and stay to the club even during recession. And last, our revenue approach is a little bit different because we're in the dues business. And that's, we're in the dues business on the country club side. We've also built a membership model on the public golf side. And what we want to do is to turn our customers into our sales force. So we've learned from the church model where we form committees, and we have lots and lots of committees to allow members to get engaged so that they take emotional responsibility for that club and for its success. It's a very, very successful model for us. So that's a little bit of background on us. When COVID hit, how we had to react, we went, like a lot of you, we went down different paths. So we went down 5 simultaneous paths. And for us, it was all offense. Number one, same thing most of you had to do. It was all about safety and protection. We had to communicate with all of our clubs, their members and guests, and put all the protocols in place. Like everyone else, we had to focus on forecasting and managing cash because it was awful. And we became experts in the government programs, PPP, earned employee retention tax credits, and unemployment. But one of the things we were very worried about in the beginning was that our members would leave us. So because they didn't have much to do. So we basically reprogrammed all of our clubs. We basically converted all of our restaurants to takeout. We turned some of our pro shops into 7-Elevens where you could get toilet paper, you could get meat, all the things that you couldn't get at the grocery store. We were able to buy them wholesale from our vendors. And we created lots of online virtual activities to keep our members connected so they saw a reason to stay in the club. Then kind of the last thing we worked on, which was probably the most important, was a fight to stay in business. When the recession, or excuse me, COVID first happened, all of the discussion was on restaurants and entertainment venues need to be shut down. And so we started to get classified into that boat. So we ended up forming an industry alliance, and we got all of the stakeholders in the golf industry together, and we formed committees, and we were calling every single governor, mayors, health directors to explain to them why golf was a safe outdoor activity. It was a battle for the first 2 months because golf was shut down in many states and many counties. We eventually won that battle, but I probably spent most of my time for the first month, trying to deal with those efforts. Obviously, it's worked out for us, and as a company, we're still very focused on COVID. We basically have a call with our senior and corporate leaders. We did it every day for the first 90 days, and then we moved to weekly to talk about the COVID issues that are facing us around the country. And fortunately or unfortunately, today was our 1-year anniversary of our first call. So we hope we can quit these calls. But it was really interesting for us in that COVID went from bust to boom. During March and April, it was awful. March, our rounds were down 14% for the industry, and they were down 42% in April. And when you have a 40% drop in revenue, it's devastating. But all of a sudden it turned, and from May on, it's been double-digit growth in rounds, in membership activity, and it continues this year. And really, what we all learned is there was nothing else to do. So everybody wanted to play golf. So we've seen record levels of rounds and record level of membership sales. The only places that really got hurt were the fly-in tourist markets like Orlando, Scottsdale during season and all that. And those have still been slow to recover. But as I mentioned, we're continuing to see high levels of activity. And like all of us in the golf industry, we felt a bit guilty about it in the beginning because there were so much awful things going on with the pandemic. And all of a sudden we're saying we're doing pretty well. So it's, 20 years ago, they talked about the Tiger bounce, and now they're talking about the COVID bounce. So it's been very, very, interesting for us. We learned a lot during the COVID time period. And we all sat back and said, what did we learn? And I think what we found is that we reaffirmed things that we already knew, probably already should have been doing, but we need to do, but sometimes we forget. For us, it was communication. because we had to communicate daily with our members and our team members about which facilities are available and how to use them. So obviously we realized there's no such thing as over communicating. Caring for us was huge. Caring for us was huge about all the things that needed to be done. It's the little things that happened, with our members and our guests and our team members. And I think what we found is people want a safe place, and a haven of refuge. So golf's turned into that. And for an industry, we picked up 50 million rounds last year over prior year. That was a 14% increase. We had 500,000 new entrants into the game. So for us, going forward, it's how do we convert some of those new people, to become from part-time golfers into avid golfers. And when the world opens back up again, when you can travel and do other things, can we keep the same level of engagement that we've had during COVID when there was nothing else to do? So that's kind of the big picture, of what we've seen happen and what we've been working on. And Tom, let me turn it back to you. We'll start answering any questions.
Well, thank you, Jim, and thank you, Tom. I'd like to just kick off the questions with one in particular that I wanted an answer to, and I've got a couple others from the group that have submitted some, and please submit questions if you have them. One of my questions is, and as an avid golfer, what are the trends or what are the things that you implemented in COVID, customer service standpoint, that you see sticking long term? And the one that comes to my mind in golf is outdoor dining. That seems to be a really attractive thing to customers. And do you think that will continue, or
Yeah,
I'll let Jim, if you don't mind responding first, Tom could do the same for his.
Sure, absolutely. It turns out everybody wants to eat outside instead of inside.
We'll hang in there, Jim.
Jim's had some issues with his
Lighting.
wire. So here he is. I'm hardwired in.
Hey, sorry about that.
No problem.
Hey, am I muted? Unmuted?
Yes, we're good.
Great. So the question was again, what's going to stick?
Sorry, yeah. What do you see sticking long term? What changes in your operations you feel like will stay around post COVID?
Well, one, the outdoor dining, definitely. We're seeing even when we have the opportunity to dine inside, members don't want to dine inside. They all want to move outside. So we've got two major projects underway at some of our clubs to build covered patios. I think that's going to be huge. And I also think programming is going to become more and more important. Before, the golf industry used to be, let me send you marketing out to I'll give you a discount to play golf on Thursday afternoon. Now what we're focused on is, let me give you a reason to play on Thursday afternoon. And that's going to be important for us, trying to create events and activities so that we can connect different golfers and different members that haven't met each other before to become new friends. I think we've found golf instruction has taken off all across the country. People have had more time, so they want to learn more, they want to get better. So we're having to add teachers and instructors, at our clubs. And then technology's gone nuts, particularly with trying to understand your golf swing and get the right equipment for you. I think when TrackMan developed their first monitors, it's so much better to take a lesson on TrackMan and then the fitting that they have right now so that you get put in the right type of equipment makes all the difference in the world. I think some of those things we're going to continue to see going forward.
Tom Tipton, would you address kind of that same question for the marina business, if you don't mind?
Sure. Yeah, I would agree on the dining component, that what we did find is that, both of our industries are outdoor, are really done and, enjoyed outdoors, and people desire to eat outdoors as well. In fact, our most recent acquisition that we did just about a month ago that included a restaurant has 95% seating outdoors. And that was specifically targeted that reason. It was in the Miami area for that reason, because of the outdoor dining. The other thing that was mentioned as well, that James said that I think is so important, is communication with our customers. we did ramp that up significantly during COVID, and our customers really appreciated that, not just from a safety and protocol standpoint, but what's going, you know, what are things going on at the marina? What are the events going on? What are we doing to create some community? Because what we found is people just in this world where they, you know, you were stuck at home in large part, people really desired some community. And even if it's socially distanced, and even if it's they just want there to be some activity out there that they know about. And then the other thing that I would say too is what we did when we were, even though we were hospitality focused, I think specifically in our boat rental program and our boat club program, we just turned those boats over where, you know, one group would be done with the boat, and like 20 or 30 minutes later, there was a new group on that boat. We didn't properly clean it. We didn't properly gas it up. We didn't make sure that that boat was in pristine condition like it was in the morning for that afternoon deal. We added about, you know, an hour and a half to 2 hours of time in between rentals to get the boat in pristine condition, and to provide time to train people on how to use the boats. And, you know, I think that's something that we learned, because we need to create an experience that the customer enjoys, similar to being a new golfer. I mean, I know the first time I played golf, you know, it's an intimidating deal, just like boating. It can be an intimidating deal. Providing instruction and helping them enjoy the sport and be more successful at it is another thing that we instituted here that we believe will help us long term. And then, you know, the last thing I'd say is just, you know, from a real estate standpoint, it's not just enough to provide the real estate in our industry, like so many people do, like Chris's experience at his marina, but that customers want an experience. They want to have relationships with the people that they're next to and involved with. And so communication and activities are going to be something that I think we'll continue to do to connect people inside of the sport.
Well, thank you for your insight. I've got 3 questions, one each for each of you that are independent. So I'll do the marinas first and then the golf. One is the simple question, Tom, of what is your breakout between lake marinas and saltwater marinas? Somebody asked that.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, it's about 70-30. So 70% of our marinas are inland, and you know, 30% are coastal. But it's our economics are flipped. Most of our value it's 70% on the coast and 30% on the inland.
Interesting. Why is that?
It's a rate per slip is just higher on the coast. There's a supply and demand challenge on the coast that's beneficial to marinas. So, you know, the environmental aspects of building a marina in coastal waters, it's almost impossible to do. So the existing marinas that are out there, it's a fixed supply. And then, you know, when boating is increasing, the supply and demand really fits into your favor. So that coastal marina is much more profitable from a per linear foot.
Yeah, but probably harder to acquire as well.
They are, yeah.
Well, the next question's for you, Jim. The question was, can you talk about what you see the economic and, well, the total impact to DFW of the PGA moving to Dallas?
I think it's a positive. I think you'll start to see, you know, more and more golf companies, you know, based here. Right now, really, Dallas has become the epicenter of golf. When you look at it, you've got Top Golf based here. You got Club Court based here. Drive Shack has just moved here. Century's here. Arcus is here. So you've got probably 5 out of the top 10 companies in the golf business already based here in Dallas. Having a lot of the PGA executives moving here to Dallas will be great. They're going to host tournaments here. So that's going to give more notoriety to Dallas. And I think it'll cause more people to want to play. The golf course, in fact, I'm going out there tomorrow morning to meet with the PGA folks, you know, to go look at some of the golf courses out there. But they're going to be resort and public. So I don't think it'll have much impact on the country clubs, because the country clubs are very healthy here in Dallas. For those that you belong to country clubs, most of them are full with a waiting list. But I think it'll drive more high-end resort golf, and it'll be good for us. It'll make Dallas more of a golf map. It used to be that South Florida, was where everybody was, where the PGA of America was located in the tour. So now with PGA moving here, I think that's going to make a huge difference.
Well, that's interesting. Well, we've got to go about 3 or 4 minutes to get CE. So the last question I'd like each of you to talk to is an interesting one. He says, can you differentiate, or do you see a difference between the recession in 08, 09 to your membership versus COVID?
Yeah, so for us, COVID was different because you had nothing else to do. During the recession, there were plenty of other things to do, and membership was a discretionary choice. So we had very little attrition during COVID and great membership sales. So I think with the exception of one club, most of our country clubs are full with a wait list right now. During the recession, you saw anybody that had business spending went away, that used it for golf entertainment went away. But memberships held up okay, because what we found with the consumer is, when they have to make dollar choices, they make the choice, do I take the 1 week vacation to Hawaii with the family, or do I keep the club all year round and we get to enjoy it 52 weeks out of the year? So we found that the private club industry held up fairly well during the COVID. Public golf got hammered. But what we did see, during the recession, when I said during the recession, we did see large initiation deposits or joining fees to get into country clubs really got slashed. And we're starting to see that come back now to where the other way, to where clubs are starting to raise their joining fees. And then particularly at, some of the clubs here in Dallas, that are full and successful, they're all starting to escalate them now, because it's 2 to 3 year waiting list to get into some of these clubs.
Tom, how about your business?
Yeah, so I would, they really had completely different impacts to our business. When you go back and look at 2008 and 2009, really the marina industry, the marinas that our group owned during that time were really flat in 08, and then had a small decline in 2009. What's interesting about the marina industry, which helps makes it recession resistant, is no matter who owns the boat, these vessels are too big to just park in for the most part, the marinas we own, the boats are too big to go park in some self-storage lot or in your own driveway. So what you have is whether you own the boat as the customer, or the bank took it over, somebody still has to keep it in a slip. Somebody still has to keep it in storage. And so there's really not a secondary opportunity for them to no longer pay the rental rate for us. So that part of the business stays very, very strong. You might not increase rates, but you don't lose any ground. But what we found here in the COVID environment, well, what happened in 08 though is that every other service area went down because people weren't using the boats. They were just storing the boats, and they weren't using the boats because they were trying to reduce the amount of overhead that they had, or any kind of cost. What happened in COVID time was every place other than our marina in New York, New Jersey, which had more of the business restrictions on it. There was still the benefit of the usage of the boats. And so, in fact, in many cases, people used the smaller boats even more. And so we saw really substantial growth out of this. But the good thing is we have downside protection on the real estate side, like we saw in 08 and 09.
Interesting. Well, I've got one more question that came in while we're talking. This one's towards Jim. And being in the over 60 crowd, I'm not sure what this is all about, but the question is, how do you track 35-year-olds to golf long term?
I think we have to start them with more of an entertainment focus versus a traditional golf focus. And that's where we're going. One of the things we're doing is we're trying to change up our driving ranges and make them more entertainment oriented, very similar to what you might see to Top Golf by introducing technology, music, food and things like that. But for us, it's about entertainment orientation. But it's also more about connections. In other words, if we can get them to where they have relationships with other club members, whether they're the same age or not, what we found is they may quit a club, but they won't quit their friends. So for us, it's about engagement and connection, and it's more about fun. When I grew up in the business, everybody was focused on having low handicaps and playing in the member guests and tournaments and keeping score. What you find with the younger group out there is they want to have more fun. They've got music on the carts. They'll play traditional formats, and it's just about having fun out there. So we're having to change the way some of our events and the way we handle certain things.
Well, as a golfer, I appreciate you not allowing 6-hour rounds. Well, if there's no more questions, you guys want to make just a closing remark real quick and we'll let everybody go, if you don't mind.
Is that us? Oh.
Yeah, Jim, if there's anything you want to say to wrap up, we appreciate you being on here and all the time spent, and I appreciate everybody attending. But if there's anything you want to say?
We appreciate it and appreciate the work that you guys do, and particularly with Jack and our firm. And if you don't play golf, we hope you take up golf and you come to our golf courses or our golf resorts.
They are very nice. Tom, anything you want to say departing?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody tonight, and I'll have the same sentiment. I definitely play the golf, but try boating. It's a lot of fun on the water and something that you can do your whole life.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for your time. Gentlemen, Tom, Jim, thank you so much for being our speakers tonight, and hope you have a great evening.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, good. Now back to work.